Our next speaker actually has his work cut out for him in spades. He's still working on his presentation. A PowerPoint crash, and he's actually still repairing a couple of his slides. He just got in about 1 minute ago, which is cutting it exceedingly thin. The moderator is always the guy who has the high blood pressure after a conference like this. John Aisien of Oracle is the lead member of the outbound product management team that drives the Oracle Fusion middleware within EMEA region. Oracle Fusion middleware, as you may be aware, is the fastest growing product line at Oracle, over $1 billion in revenue in 2006 financial, and it's the suite of products that includes the identity management stuff. John, before joining Oracle, was with Thor Technologies, which became part of Oracle in 2005. Before that, he held various positions at Deloitte Consulting and Gemini Consulting. The one thing that John will not talk about, I'm pretty sure of that, is the upcoming Sun Alliance. His lips are completely shut here. And as long as the due diligence and the antitrust things are going on, nobody will answer any questions, which is very frustrating for analysts and journalists like myself, who are dying to ask all kinds of questions, but we don't get any answers. So instead, we will have to be happy to listen to his words on enterprise IT-enabled cost avoidance and reduction, the role of identity and access management. And hopefully you got your presentation ready on time. We'll see.
Thanks, Tim.
It takes a while.
I'm sure. Well, good morning all. While we're waiting for, I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to do, AV folks. As mentioned by Tim, thank you very much for the warm introduction, first of all. And I certainly apologize for my gremlins regarding the presentation, but hopefully you'll find the next half an hour useful. Identity and access management is a key component of all of the capabilities that are part of our middleware stack. And middleware for us is... Thank you, Tim. Excellent. And middleware for us is really all of the shared and shareable services that provide capability that support every stage of the life cycle of an application. So if you think about that definition, it's no big surprise that identity and access management is a key foundational component to all of the middleware services that we believe every application requires, whether that application is consuming those services based on Oracle middleware or homegrown middleware or middleware from other vendors. Specifically, what I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes discussing is how the prevalent economic context has affected, or even a question, has it affected our ability to implement identity services in a manner that yields value to our respective organizations. And I'm going to do that using a little bit of an agenda here. Talk initially about INAM project adoption trends arising from a series of surveys that we carried out across our middleware customer base in September last year. I do have to admit it was a primarily North America-based survey, but there were some customers from Europe that were represented in the survey. I'm hoping that you'll find some of the results of the survey that have distilled into a couple of slides as interesting as I certainly have. Then we'll do a bit of a primer on the business value that arises from identity and access management, not because we expect this to be new to, frankly, any of you, but it's a means of providing, I think, a reminder of some of the fundamental capabilities that these products provide, as well as an aide-memoire that can potentially help you figure out the order in which to deploy capabilities within your overall program in a manner that aligns with your organization's specific hurdle rates. In other words, what are the specific ways in which you seek funding for projects, receive funding for projects, demonstrate the value of those projects, and how have those changed in the context of the prevalent economic climate. And then hopefully agree on some conclusions, and if there's any time left with Tim's support, actually seek one or two sort of participations from the audience. Because what we've really done is distill a series of war stories from our customer base, both here in Europe and in North America. And it'd be wonderful to see how that aligns with the representative sample within this room. So first of all, undoubtedly the economy is having a significant impact on projects as a whole. Most of the folks that we've spoken to, really across the entirety of our infrastructure software business, and identity and access management is no different, are grappling with numerous challenges arising from reduction in IT budget, reductions in IT headcount, significantly greater levels of scrutiny across the types of projects that are approved, etc. So all they're trying to figure out is how can we realize immediate cost savings with the new projects that we fund? How can we justify the value of capital expenditure or capital investments versus the expected savings that we'll obtain from those investments? And how can we align with our finance director or our CFO's new requirement that, for example, says all projects or all newly funded projects within this new financial year, for example, has to align with a demonstrable, measurable return on investment of 6 months, for example, excluding productivity gains and many of the other capabilities that we've used to justify projects in this space in the past. And as a result of that, how can we make these projects self-funding, even if they're extensions to existing projects? So as a continuation of that discussion, we asked 85 IT executives, not identity and access management executives necessarily, but 85 IT executives as a whole that use at least one component of Oracle Fusion middleware. And there's about 85,000 of these sorts of customers. So effectively, this was 1 in 1,000 of our Oracle middleware customer base. And we asked this subset of them, fairly unrepresentative in the way that they were selected, frankly, where they were in the adoption curve for identity and access management, irrespective of whether those services were powered by Oracle's products or not, just to make sure we're grounded on what this survey means. And the interesting thing is, over the course of the last 3 years, the news is actually pretty good. Across this sort of fairly rough sample that's unrepresentative of our identity customer base or the identity ecosystem as a whole, we find that over 60% of the respondents have either implemented or are in the process of implementing identity and access management services. And these excluded foundational services like directory services, for example. But instead, we focused exclusively on higher value services like identity administration, role lifecycle management, and all the various components of runtime access control that many of these customers may want to adopt.
Can you say something about the size of the company sample?
Right. So the question was, the size of the sample was 85 respondents.
The companies that you
Right, right. It would be, I have the raw data, and I can go ahead and take another look, but off the top of my head, these were IT directors and CIOs of fairly large companies that were parts of our middleware advisory board. So if you can imagine the sorts of companies that self-select to become members of advisory boards. They're normally, frankly, folks who can afford to send executives to Oracle Open World, which is where we did the survey, et cetera. So I can't answer your question with accurate data, but I would say it probably tends towards the larger subset of our overall customer base. But again, these weren't just Oracle Identity customers, important to note. But even for those that had not yet implemented, over 40% represented within this survey, 23% plan to implement within the next year, and then another 7% plan to implement within the next 1 to 3 years, and only 11% of an overall middleware customer base had no plans to implement over the course of the next 3 years. I think this tells me a number of things. The hypothesis that basically presumes that identity services is a key component of an overall middleware strategy aligns tremendously well with the way that customers are adopting these technologies within and across their enterprise. That's one. Two, it tells me, and I'll have additional data on this, that in spite of the prevalent economic context, customers are still finding increasingly creative ways to fund projects, new projects, or extend existing projects in this space. And we'll come back to this theme later on in the presentation. Another key point that I found to be tremendously interesting is over the course of the 9 or 9.5 years that I've been involved in identity projects in some shape or form, identity projects, irrespective of how they're packaged and sold, are effectively table stakes. They are foundational infrastructure projects that organizations need to embark on to provide tremendous value, but over, in many cases, a reasonably long period of time, as is the case for most infrastructure.